right now has just over a 4-point lead. Not even half of the votes tallied yet in Michigan. The final one I'll tease out here is Pennsylvania. As you were just talking about there, Andy, McCormick right now has just over a point lead, 84% of those votes tallied. So the question is no longer which party will gain control of the Senate. The question is, how much control will Republicans have? All right, very good, Austin. Thank you so much, Steve. You just heard GOP will control the Senate, but we want to take you out to a Senate seat that did go through today, and that is in California. As we're following this, as Adam Schiff taking this one over Steve Garvey, the famous Dodger player, Padres player. He is currently at the podium making this concession speech there in the Golden State of California. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
Because you have truly been the wind beneath our wings. And we love you for that. But there's one thing, I see a little blue in the audience tonight. And I assume you're at the wrong party, but I think that you're still celebrating that Dodger World Championship. You know, winning the World Championship for this 2014 was amazing. So proud of the boys, fighting at all times, playing when they're injured and didn't feel well, and then winning in Game 5 at Yankee Stadium. If you can't win at home, winning at Yankee Stadium is the next best thing. And of course, the '81 World Championship, and you remember the great infield of Say and Russell and Bopes and myself and Dusty Baker. And you're all going, I remember those guys.
All right, Steve Garvey, even though he did have to concede, he was noted to win by the Dodgers, so maybe a little bit of a silver lining for him in terms of that. So we're following that, and just as we said it, Adam Schiff stepping up to the podium as he did take this Senate seat in California, moving chambers from the House to the Senate. Listen in to his victory speech here on Live Now.
And appreciate our different backgrounds and cultures. I've seen it firsthand. From the first day I launched this campaign to the visits I've made to nearly every corner of the Golden State. From meeting with local leaders in the border community of Calexico to seeing the restoration of redwoods north of Willits, I've met the most amazing people all across California. I've listened to your concerns, I've heard your fears, I've shared your hopes, and imagined the future that you want to see for yourselves and for your children. And because of this, every day I woke up energized and hopeful. In Bakersfield, I met with entrepreneurs who turned their passion into successful small businesses that have lifted up their communities. In Salinas, I heard from farm workers who toiled in the fields from sunrise to sundown, rain or shine, to ensure that families across the country had food on their tables. In Oakland, I felt the joy and energy of an early morning service at the Allen Temple Baptist Church. In Merced, I sat down with college students and heard about the careers they were building for themselves. In Lakewood, I saw firsthand the hard and rewarding labor of childcare providers. I witnessed their patience, their kindness, and the love that they bring to their work. Our state has its struggles, like every state, but none are insurmountable because we are the Golden State and we get big things done. And my promise to you is that I'm going to deliver on day one, week one, year one, and keep on delivering for this amazing state. Because together there is no challenge that we cannot overcome. We leave no community behind. We do not stop, we do not rest until all our citizens have a safe place to live, clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, safe neighborhoods to raise their children, good hospitals, clinics, and healthcare, and the best public schools in the world. In pursuit of this dream for all our people, I will not rest, California. In the Senate, I will be a champion and voice for all Californians, whether you voted for me or not, whether you live in the big city or a small county, whether you grew up here or came to America searching for a better life. We are going to build more affordable housing so that you aren't forced to choose between your rent and putting food on the table. We are going to ensure that our fellow neighbors do not have to sleep on the street. We are going to help hardworking families by lowering costs. We are going to fight tooth and nail to protect abortion access and defend democracy and our freedoms. We are going to bring resources and jobs back to the Golden State to create opportunity for all Californians. We're going to fight on behalf of our dream workers, our farm workers, our immigrant families, so they no longer have to live in the shadows. We are going to protect our planet, fight climate change, and bring good paying green jobs here to California. It is a big task, I know, but we can do it because we are going to do it together. I am determined to fight every single day on behalf of this great state and its great people. And I am so thankful for your trust and your support. And I can't wait to do this job with you together. I want to thank my incredible wife, Eve, and yes, we are Adam and Eve. My kids, Lexi and Eli. Lexi's boyfriend, Eric, gets a shout out. My brother, Daniel, and his wife, Amy. My brother, David, and his family. My nieces and my nephews, and of course, the one the world revolves around, baby Maya. I could not have done this without your endless love and support, and it's so wonderful to get to celebrate with you tonight. Eve, I don't know where to begin, but this Adam would be lost without this Eve. I love you, and I'm grateful to you for your strength and love. Lexi and Eli, being your dad is my favorite job in the world. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. And I also want to acknowledge my mother and father, Cheryl and Ed Schiff. While they're no longer with us, I wouldn't be standing here but for their love and guidance and support. My father lived to be 96. He passed earlier this year. And I so wish he could be here with us tonight. Dad, give Mom a hug and tell her I hope she's still not upset with me for not being a doctor. I also want to thank every volunteer and supporter who made calls, sent texts, knocked on doors, and chipped in a few bucks, because your hard work not only made this center race possible, but you are going to deliver the House of Representative majority to Hakeem Jeffries tonight. And I want to thank Nancy Pelosi, the greatest of all time, the most incredible speaker in our history, for her friendship, her mentorship, her leadership. There was no one who stood more in the breach defending our democracy than Nancy Pelosi, and I thank you. We set out to build the largest grassroots campaign in California history, and I think we hit the mark. To my wonderful staff, I thank you. You are all dedicated public servants who've committed countless hours, nights, weekends to this effort, and this victory is also yours. To my wonderful constituents in the 30th Congressional District who've supported me for over 25 years, I cannot thank you enough for your confidence and the honor of representing you. I hope that I have served you well and made you proud. And to my new constituents all over the state, whether you voted for me or not, I am committed to being a champion for every Californian in every corner of this wonderful state. California, I thank you for your trust. I am grateful to serve as your U.S. Senator. Now, let's get to work. Thank you, California. Thank you, everyone. God bless this state and country. Thank you so much.
That was just Adam Schiff there alongside his wife, Eve, after securing the Senate seat left by the late Dianne Feinstein. So you can see a happy Adam Schiff there on there, but also talking about how his hope for Hakeem Jeffries to be the majority leader in terms of the
House of Representatives. Of course, we're following that, the latest here on Live Now Fox in terms of that Senate seat. I do want to talk more about another race call we have in terms of Nebraska and what they do. Another electoral vote going in the tally for Vice President Kamala Harris as she secured the District 2 vote, 84% coming in. So it's 230 to 210 right now, just 20 minutes past the top of the hour, 12:20 a.m. Eastern time. So we're following the latest here on all of this on Live Now from Fox. We're going to get out to more of this in terms of the race for the White House, a live look there in West Palm Beach, Florida. As you can see, some of the excitement, some of the vibes on this hand. The microphone still set up in the very front of this. I don't know how soon we could see any speakers, but also at Howard University on that campus, the alma mater of Vice President Kamala Harris. We'll continue to follow the latest with this race for the White House. I'm Andy Mack. We're back up.
If you haven't been watching Dr. Phil, here's what I'm going to say.
This is how we do it on the Dr. Phil show. You're about to get sold stuff.
Don't miss.
Why here? Why now? Why me? Why doesn't anybody ever come to me first? Right here on Roku.
Welcome to RuPaul's Drag Race UK. Drag Race Italia. Belgique. España. Whether it means English.
Oh, I just love conversation.
English. Or somewhere in between. Whether you say girl. This plan is just ain't big enough for this much talent. Drag Race Universe, because it belongs to the world, mama.
Welcome to a new season of Line the Cooks. Delicious food, delightful guests, and lots of fun. Good food, good friends, and good times. Watch free on the Roku channel.
My name is Red, and I'm a man. Like this. If women don't find a handsome, they should at least find a handy.
Calling all Tyler Perry fans.
Make sure everybody's on high.
Your favorite hidden BET shows in one place, 24/7.
Wait, what?
Sisters, Zatina, the album, all the Queen's Men, Bruh, and Ruthless.
This is great. Everybody seems to be in a good mood.
All the heart-pounding drama. All the time. It's a wild ride. On BET, Tyler Perry Drama.
All right, welcome back into Live Now from Fox. Just past midnight on the East Coast, and we're learning now from the Harris campaign, of course, potentially some uncertainty or turbulence within that Harris campaign, despite what we're seeing on the campus there at Howard University at this watch party. As we're continuing to follow the race for the White House, let's bring in right now to the conversation to learn more about what we're hearing, what we're reporting, what Fox is reporting. Christina Evans. Christina, thank you so much for joining us. Break it all down. What are we hearing, and maybe are there some nervous feelings inside that Harris camp?
Yeah, Andy, I think you'd be right when you say the nervous feelings maybe are going out throughout the Harris camp. Again, I want to show you again inside of our social studio here at Live Now. We've been keeping a close eye on all of those storylines that are popping up online, and this is one of them. This memo going out to several Harris campaign members as well. What you're looking at right now is a tweet from Nandita Bose. She's a reporter with Reuters, but this is a screenshot of an email that was sent out. Harris's campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, sent this message out and stressing patience and resolve. This was a message that was sent to all campaign staff, and it was also meant for some who are outside of the campaign, who are hopefuls for the Democratic Party, trying to give a sense of hope. She does say in this email that as we've known all along, this is a razor-thin race. So right now, the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign is planning on waiting out the blue wall of states. We know this is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Those are the states that they're calling to be Harris's path to victory. But right now, none of those states have been called as of yet. The only battleground state that's been called is, of course, North Carolina, but those blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, have not been called, and this is what the Harris campaign is now holding out for. Again, making this memo known on social media, as well as sending it out directly to those campaign people who are working for Vice President Kamala Harris, saying at the end of it, Jen O'Malley Dillon saying, get some sleep. We're looking forward to tomorrow because they don't anticipate these results until the early morning hours. So, Andy, that's what we're seeing right now on social media as it pertains to Kamala Harris's campaign.
Yeah, if the results continue to go the way they do, I don't know how much sleep those people within the campaign will be able to get. Christina, thank you, though, for that great reporting, as always.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. Let's continue on discussing this, the latest in that turbulence within potentially that camp as well. I do want to put up this tweet from Jackie Heinrich talking about this here on Live Now from Fox, talking about 3 sources close to Harris are expressing concern over Harris's path to victory. It may be too narrow to overcome. One source at the Harris Friends and Family Party says, quote, her path is so narrow that she is not doing what she needs to do in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The exit polls I saw hours ago are accurate. They need to suddenly outperform those. Don't believe that will happen. Asked about this, a second source close to Harris told me, quote, I 100% agree. The path is very difficult to victory. His numbers are higher than expected in counties where he should be losing by larger margins in Pennsylvania and Michigan. A third source close to the campaign said, I think we're losing this. Hearing word that Harris may be coming to Howard University soon, but not for another hour. So that's reporting there from Fox's Jackie. With this race for the White House, not a lot of call. North Carolina was called for Trump, but Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin yet to be called at this point as well. All right, let's continue on here on Live Now from Fox. Let's bring in my colleague, Austin Westfall, also political analyst, Rich Rubino, to continue this feeling of what we're hearing from inside of the camps. Rich, I want to ask you, how concerning is it, and how real are these feelings of uncertainty within that camp?
I think it's a lot of uncertainty. It's probably a lot of pessimism within the Harris camp. I think that some of these places specifically, they thought that they were going to do a lot better when some of these counties came in. What's basically happening is that Donald Trump is overperforming. There's still a path certainly for Vice President Harris to win, but it's becoming a more and more narrow of a path. And I think that my guess is that there will certainly will not have the election called tonight, but it's becoming extremely. There obviously is a lot of pessimism within the Harris camp right now about the results and what they've seen.
I got to ask you about the blue wall, Rich. So as we look at our map here, the blue wall, that's something that everybody's been discussing ad nauseum. Of course, the blue wall states are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Ever since 1992, these 3 states, they have voted as a unit. Most of the time, they voted blue. In 2016, though, they voted red. Why do these 3 states tend to vote as a unit? Is there any understanding?
Yes, and they're very similar, although Pennsylvania is not a Midwest state. It's more of a northeastern state. Michigan, Wisconsin, of course, are both Midwestern states. But there are a lot of those, what's a very important constituency, and those are white, blue-collar voters. Many of them are traditionally Democrats. Many of them were Reagan Democrats. They came back to the Democratic Party, voted for Clinton twice, voted for Barack Obama twice, and then they moved over to Donald Trump. And I think part of that is trade agreements like NAFTA, for example, disproportionately had an effect on some of these counties and some of these parts of these states. As a result, there's been a lot of job losses, and whether it's right or wrong, they blamed it on trade agreements. Those trade agreements essentially had bipartisan support. NAFTA, for example, had Bill Clinton signing it with Bob Dole, Newt Gingrich, Bob Michael in the House and Senate, respectively, getting it through. A lot of Republicans were kind of free trade, laissez-faire Republicans. Didn't really go very well. It didn't bode well in these parts of the country. Now that you have Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump has gotten to the left essentially of the vice president of the Democratic Party on trade, talking about tariffs, a lot of traditional Democrats, independents, conservative Democrats went over and they voted for Donald Trump the first time, and you're seeing that again. It's a problem Democrats have. It's something when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, he also took very similar positions on issues like trade. And the other thing is that the Republicans do not have the traditional kind of anti-labor rhetoric. For example, J.D. Vance is somebody who is opposed to the idea to the idea of right to work laws. They've tried to become more and more populist and more friendly to the workers to that respect. And I think that is certainly helping them and boding well in trying to unlock that what really was a hammerlock the Democrats had from 1992 to 2016.
All right, very, very good. I do want to ask you more about Trump and the movement that is behind it. And I want to put up several of these posts here on social media. This one saying there is still no sign of Harris at a rapidly thinning watch party at Howard University, her alma mater. She'd be speaking soon to a nearly deserted campus if she does not appear soon. And that is in contrast to what we're seeing now at the Donald Trump party. And I believe we have a post there of him arriving at this Mar-a-Lago post, as you can see from the New York Post, saying Donald Trump arrived at Mar-a-Lago election night party there with some of his supporters as well. And Rich, I do want to ask you about something else that was said in that post, in the reporting from Jack Heinrich, talking about the fact that his numbers, Trump's numbers, are higher than expected in counties where he should be losing by larger margins in Pennsylvania and Michigan. What do you make of that, where Trump is, his numbers are higher than expected in some of the counties there from the Harris campaign and what they were expected? What does that mean?
You know, back in 1982, Tom Bradley, he was the mayor of Los Angeles. He was running for governor of California. He was African American, and he took polls, and the polls showed he would win anywhere from 10 to 15 points. Then people went to the polls, and Tom Bradley ended up losing. And one of the arguments why he lost the race was the so-called Bradley effect, meaning that voters would tell pollsters that they were going to vote for him, and then when they actually got to the polls, they could not vote for an African American. There are other factors as well. For example, Jerry Brown was running for Senate, and his campaign tended to flounder toward the end, and that had a disproportionate effect on Bradley. What I'm saying here is essentially there might be voters in the suburbs of places like Philadelphia who will tell pollsters, because they don't know who the pollster is. It's perhaps not politically correct to say you supported Trump. This is all speculation here. But they can be telling pollsters that they'll vote for Donald, that they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. But once they go in there, the Australian ballot or the secret ballot, if you will, they will end up actually voting for Donald Trump. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is that Donald Trump's effort, they might just have a better get out the vote rally, get out the vote effort, and they might have just had a better ground game. And perhaps that ground game was kind of underappreciated. Now they're seeing the fruits of their labor.
Let's talk a little bit about Georgia. This is one state, Rich, that we've been focusing in on. In Georgia, it's interesting. Georgia right now has 93% of the votes counted right now. Trump has about a little bit over a 2-point lead over Harris. You've been following races so closely for so long, and you don't work for the Associated Press. That's who's calling these races for us. But when you look at these figures, what do you say about Harris's chances in the Peach State?
It looks very dim. I mean, we don't know, obviously, until we get 100% of turnout. It's obviously very close, but perhaps she did not maximize the votes that she could get in places like Fulton County. It's interesting because her strategy, she actually spent 2 days in the campaign trail just riding through South Georgia, Southwest Georgia, rural parts of Georgia, some of whom were traditionally Republican areas, to try to minimize the damage that they could have in those areas. It looks like it really was for naught. It didn't really have necessarily the effect that they thought it would. They also employed Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton went to many parts of southern Georgia, turned to traditionally culturally conservative, the types of people similar to those that Bill Clinton won over in 1992 when he actually won the state. He went on and tried to get those. It looks like despite what Barack Obama did, despite what Bill Clinton did, despite what Harris did, despite what Tim Walz did, they seem to be treading water right now. And if they lose Georgia, they certainly would need to take just about all three of those states. But Georgia is a very interesting state. Certainly, it has some very democratic areas right around Atlanta. You have to maximize your turnout, as well as some of the African American areas toward the southwestern part of the state. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the final results are going to be in the Peach State.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about that, because we're hearing different reports about Gwinnett County and maybe the delayed votes that they're going to kind of tally up there in that county. Talk about maybe some of the areas around Atlanta, because Gwinnett County around Atlanta, how strong are they for Kamala Harris? How important are some of those kind of areas around there going for Harris, and how critical will these be, even if they are delayed?
It's a very interesting state right around Atlanta, you have areas like, for example, if you keep driving, you run into places like Marietta and Sandy Springs, which was actually used to be very Republican. Newt Gingrich was actually represented that area for that area. So it was a very conservative congressional district. But when I say conservative, they're more or less fiscally conservative, but they're kind of socially moderate. Donald Trump is kind of inhospitable to their ideology. So consequently, a lot of them now have a Democratic congresswoman, for example. So it's become more and more Democrat. I think this is what we're seeing around the country. This is part of the Trump effect, right? Trump does very well in rural areas of the country. He maximizes his vote, but he tends to falter in some of the suburban areas where Republicans like Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush were able to rack up big margins. They feel kind of alien to Donald Trump's kind of new populist type of an ideology. And those are the areas right around very much educated class, places like Marietta, where there's really not much of a Southern accent. Those are the types of places that I think Vice President Harris really thought she could capitalize on.
I got to ask you about Michigan, specifically about Wayne County. We see behind me here 55% of the votes have been tallied in Wayne County. Right now, Harris has 58% of the vote. If we're going back to the Biden election 4 years ago, Biden won that county with 68% of the vote. Why is this particular county important, Rich? I'm sure you know this. This is one of the largest areas of Arab Americans in the country. Can you tell us about how their vote factors into this election? The Israel-Hamas war has been a major talking point of both campaigns.
Yes, very interesting. We saw Donald Trump the last weekend in the campaign actually going to Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn, Michigan has the largest share of Muslim and Arab American voters per capita. But I think that there's really been a lot in the community been inflamed. Last time around, Joe Biden won 86% of the Muslim vote. This time around, there was a poll taken by the Center for Islamic American Relations that showed Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate in that community. Remember, we're just talking about Muslim Americans, was actually winning a plurality of the vote. It's not that they necessarily liked Jill Stein per se. It's more that they were trying to send a message to Vice President Harris that they wanted there to be an arms embargo, and many of them blamed Joe Biden and Vice President Harris for continuing to send arms to Israel that are used in Gaza. So this really has been a lot of disaffected voters, Muslim voters. Some of them are going to Donald Trump. Some of them will be going to Jill Stein. And some of them are going to certainly stay with Vice President Harris. But Donald Trump has went in there. He racked up some endorsements. Some mayors in that county certainly have endorsed this campaign. But it's really been a problem for the Democrats, similar to what Hubert Humphrey had in 1968 in the Vietnam War. He just could not bring out a lot of those anti-Vietnam War protesters to the Democratic side. This time around, Vice President Harris has had the same very similar problem, trying to tell them that she's a little bit different from Joe Biden, that she would favor some sort of a ceasefire. But certainly you can see in the numbers that she's not doing as well as Joe Biden pre-Israel Gaza war.
All right, very good. Rich Rubino, thank you so much for joining us. Don't go anywhere. We're going to continue on covering all of the latest, but we do want to take a little bit of a break because we're monitoring all of these shots. But thank you again. All right, let's give you some looks at what we're following here on Live Now from Fox of all of these states, of some of these hotly contested battleground states in Georgia. I want to put up this post here as Donald Trump there, a lead almost over 2 points at this moment. 16, a very critical electoral votes in Pennsylvania. It is even tighter there, 19 electoral votes. Trump, though, in the lead at this point. So we're following the latest with that, as well as a key Senate seat in Pennsylvania up for grabs. Right now, Dave McCormick does lead that by just 1 percentage point. We could be hearing from Dave McCormick here in a matter of moments. You can see the crowd, someone get riled up at this stage there in Pennsylvania. So we'll take you out to this as soon as it happens here on Live Now from Fox. We're also seeing movement right now in the West Palm Beach, Florida, at the watch party for former President Donald Trump. We see someone on the stage. We don't know if they're setting up the microphone, getting everything. The stage is set. Camera phones are out at this point. But we're following the latest here well past midnight now, 40 minutes past the midnight here on Live Now from Fox for this. All right, let's slide away Continue here. Let me put up this before we go to break. Just a new post from Jackie Heinrich. New reporting here saying two sources tell Jackie Heinrich close to the campaign say Harris will not address the crowd at Howard tonight. Senator Richmond will come out and give remarks. Harris is expected to speak tomorrow, and you can imagine the crowd there at Howard University disappointed by this. You can see maybe that some of them learning this news, hearing some about this, and potentially leaving for the night to see Harris tomorrow. The enthusiasm going off as is past midnight there. So plenty of people still waiting here on this election night. Let's find a way for a quick 2-minute break. We'll get out to more top headlines.
I got an A. I caught an A. I caught an A. How did she do it? I get it. You're jealous. Gloria? Peter's gonna hate.
I don't care. You're embarrassing yourself.
Drewster hasn't been a cakewalk. I can't let him fly slow.
Then let's find him a date.
You should say yes.
Wouldn't want to go to prom with Drew Torres. I'm sorry.
Okay, show's over.
Oh my gosh, guys. Ah, my God.
check marks have been placed by his name or by other people's names. What are we expecting to hear from him tonight? Could he come out and say that he won the election, even though the AP has yet to call it for him? What can we hear from Donald Trump at this speech?
That is very possible. Back in 2020, he essentially came out and said that he was at the White House at the time, that he believed he was going to win. But there is a very formidable possibility that he could say something like that. My guess is that he will say that we have to wait till the results. I think that because so far they seem to be in his favor, it's in his best interest to try to be cautious, just say something to the effect of "thank you everybody for coming," and then just kind of walk away, and then hope that tomorrow he will receive a concession from Vice President Harris. But right now, we really don't know. Once again, only one battleground state polls come in, and there still is a possibility for Vice President Harris, and that's why she didn't want to come out. She was trying to strategize what's going to happen tomorrow.
So let's just talk about what's the tradition when the race is not called yet. Let's be completely clear about that. The race has not been called by the Associated Press at this hour. But what is the order of operations when it comes to a concession? Does it start with one candidate making a personal phone call to the other?
Yes, that's how it's supposed to work. One candidate makes a phone call, says that they concede, and then the candidate goes out and gives a speech. And usually when he gives his speech, he said the candidate usually is very nice and says, "I appreciate my opponent. I appreciate the campaign that he ran." Something to that effect. That's usually the protocol. I don't know, because we're in such a divided time right now, if Vice President Harris would actually call up and give a concession speech, if Donald Trump would come on and kind of applaud her. But that's usually kind of what happens. Sometimes if it's a blowout, like in 1984, Walter Mondale conceded very early. There was actually an issue back in 1980 because Jimmy Carter, when he losing in a landslide, he lost 44 states that year, called up former California Governor Ronald Reagan and conceded early. And Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, blames Jimmy Carter for doing that for about 10 House seats in the West Coast, because what happened was a lot of people that were traditionally Democrats in Oregon, California, and Washington State did not come out and vote because they were depressed, because they believed that their presidential candidate had lost the race. So sometimes, even if you know you're going to lose the race badly, it's the best thing in order for your party, so the candidates that are trying to run on your coattails, that are trying to get as many voters to come out, it's better for that sometimes, but that the candidate concedes as late as possible. 2000, Al Gore conceded to George W. Bush. Then a few hours later, called back and rescinded his endorsement. And George W. Bush said, "Are you saying that you're rescinding my endorsement?" To which Al Gore famously said, "You don't have to get stuck about it."
All right, very good. That's good historical context, and interesting to look back at previous election cycles and see what happened before. And I do want to get to some news here on Live Now from Fox. Fox News is projecting that Trump will win Georgia, but the AP at this point, as we are relying on that, the Associated Press in a significant way has not called this president's these 6 swing electoral votes yet for Trump, 50.9 to 48.4 at this point. So he holds a significant lead, but Fox News reporting that Donald Trump will take the peach state, the AP not at this point. Let's talk about that.
Looks like we have McCormick coming out.
Oh, it looks like Dave McCormick has come out. Well, good eyes there, Austin. Rich, stick with us. We're going to continue here on Live Now from Fox, a key Senate seat there in Pennsylvania. Let's take us to it now here and hear from him on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you. What a great group of friends. We are so honored to have you all here today, and have a mic like Dina Powell. So to say that Dina and I are partners in this whole thing, and I wouldn't have done it without her, is an understatement. She is. This is something we decided to do together. Something that we felt honored to try to do. It's a mountain to climb. And none of this would have ever happened without Dina. So thank you, Dina. And now I want to just ask the question, who's ready to save America? We got to do it. We've got to do it. And listen, this election night's not quite over, but about 85% of the vote is in. And we've looked at where all the rest of it coming in, and it looks like we're headed in a very good direction. And listen, when we started this, Dina and I looked at the country. We feel like we've been blessed by everything America has to offer. Two of the luckiest people in the world. But that opportunity, that American dream is slipping away. And we got to get it back for every single Pennsylvanian and every single American. And we need new leadership. We need new leadership in the Senate to make sure that every single kid in Pennsylvania has the opportunity to be all that they can be, regardless of party, race, creed. We need to create opportunity for every single person. We need to create an economy that works for everybody. We need to secure our border. We need to have energy policy that protects the environment, but also makes us secure and creates great jobs. The bottom line is we need leadership. We don't have it, and we're going to get it. And so, listen, in the coming days, the election results will be finalized. And when they are, we will look forward to a new agenda, a new America. And we'll look back on this day today and we'll say that was the day that we turned the corner. That was the day that we had new leadership in Pennsylvania. That was the day that we got our country back on track. And, some of you know, I think most of you probably know, I had the opportunity to go to West Point, and my brother went to West Point, and my mom and dad went with us to West Point for 8 years in a row. And they hadn't gone back for 35 years, and we took them back last fall. And with Dina's parents as well, and we walked past the MacArthur statue, and it has a very famous speech etched in granite. And the speech says, "Duty, honor, country." Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are your rallying point to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems little cause for faith, and to create hope when hope becomes forlorn. And that makes sense to me because this is a moment where we don't have enough leaders showing courage. This is a moment where Americans are losing faith. This is a moment where America is losing hope. But we can turn that page. We can look forward. We can have an America that works for everybody. It starts now. It starts with this election. It starts right here in Pennsylvania. And so from the bottom of our hearts, we have been so honored to campaign across Pennsylvania, 450 visits in every little town, in every city. And the people we've met along the way have given us hope. They've given us faith. They've given us courage to want to represent and serve the great people of our Commonwealth. It'll be the honor of our lifetimes. Thank you very much.
You can just listen in there. Dave McCormick making these speech to supporters as he leads this Senate race against the incumbent Bob Casey right there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We saw both the Harris and the Trump campaigns in that state yesterday on the final day of campaigning on the eve of the election. So we're still awaiting to hear from the former President Donald Trump there in West Palm Beach, Florida at that convention center. He's expected to make some remarks coming up in just a little bit of time. I do want to put up this here just to give you a sense of what we're looking at that Senate seat, as Dave McCormick does have a lead almost 2 points over the incumbent Bob Casey right now in that state in Pennsylvania. So very critical swing vote potentially, as the incumbent could be flipped in terms of blue to red right now. So we're following the latest here on this, and we do want to give you another call. On Fox News reporting it just a little bit ago. We are relying on the Associated Press right here about Georgia, and we are just hearing this call coming in right now at this point, talking about Donald Trump winning Georgia here just about 1 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. As you can see the check mark next to the name of the former president right now over Kamala Harris, the vice president. So it is now 2:46, closing in ever closer to that 270 mark right now, some 24 away at this point. Kamala Harris 210 right now for this. So let's just continue on. I do want to give you just a contrast of what we saw just a little bit ago there in West Palm Beach, Florida at this convention center of what's coming up. in just a little bit. But also what we heard from Howard University in Washington, D.C. is Cedric Richmond did make remarks to a crowd, telling the crowd there that Kamala Harris would not be making a speech tonight. Let's take you right now back out to this if you missed it, because it was very brief. A 90-second remarks from him, the co-chair of this Harris campaign. Let's listen to what he had to say just a little bit ago.
Good evening, Howard. Good evening to HU. I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the promise of America. We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
Quick remarks there from Cedric Richmond there, the co-chair of the Harris campaign. Just a little bit ago, we wanted to bring you to those because it was only 90 seconds, a brief remarks saying that Kamala Harris would not be speaking to her supporters tonight there on this election eve. We also are expecting to hear from the former President Donald Trump in West Palm Beach, Florida. You can see the crowd already on their feet awaiting him to take the stage. And this comes as we are learning that Trump, AP is calling it in favor. Georgia going for Trump right now. Let's continue on. Let's bring in Rich one more time here on Live Now Watch before we hear from the former President Donald Trump, who could be the next president as well. How critical was Georgia being called for him, and maybe how closer is he to regaining the White House?
Very important state. It's a state that Bill Clinton won in 1992, lost in 1996. Barack Obama was the only president to Barack Obama rather carried it, and Joe Biden certainly carried it in 2020. So it's a very critical state. It's a state that Vice President Harris spent 2 days just simply going around the state, going from event to event. They spent an enormous amount of time trying to muster the electoral votes of Georgia. I think they viewed it as absolutely critical. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily decisive, but the fact that they've lost North Carolina was the closest state that Donald Trump won last time, and Georgia, which Joe Biden barely won last time by about 11,000 votes. It's obviously is something that is a good omen for the Trump campaign.
Rich. Yeah, ultimately, Rich. Let's kind of play this out for us here. So we're talking about Trump with 247 electoral votes at this time. That means he needs 23 more. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes. Michigan has 15. Wisconsin 10. I've already gone over some of these little districts in Maine and Nebraska. Oh, and it looks like this is the first time I'm seeing that we're starting to see some results out of Nevada. Let's pull this up. 75% of the votes being tallied. Looks
Nevada?
Like Trump has 51,
I thought
just about 51%.
I thought it was pronounced Nevada.
Harris with 47.6% of the vote. So it looks like Trump has a 3-point advantage in Nevada with 3/4 of the vote tabulated. Rich, your reaction?
Yes, well, Nevada is a state. It only has 6 electoral votes. It's really the smallest of the showdown states. It's a state that if you go back to last weekend, last Friday, for example, Vice President Harris was in Reno. Donald Trump was in North Las Vegas. The state that you have Clark County, which is 70% of the state, which includes Las Vegas, which tends to be more Democrat, and then you have Reno and Carson City kind of up on the edge, kind of on the northwestern part of the state. And then you have a lot of very rural counties. Sometimes it's very hard to have a ground game because you're talking about very few voters. But if you can really maximize yourself in some of those kind of rural areas for the Republican, it can very much benefit it could very much benefit the Republican presidential candidate. But I think this certainly does not bode well for President Harris in that she obviously when you're there the weekend before the election and you're in a place like Reno, it's a state that you expect to win, and it's a state that you believe is critical to your political future.
No, that is a very good point, Rich, as we're continuing to follow the latest with all of this. I do want to put up
close-up look at the podium there, in which we are awaiting for the former president to speak up, make some remarks. Not really sure when that's going to get started at this point, but it's just one of the stories that we continue to follow here. And so while we wait for this to get underway, let's kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about what we have seen throughout these last several hours. So to do that, I would like to bring into the conversation once again my colleague and friend here, Austin Westfall. Austin has been with us all day long today, and man, a lot of stuff to keep track of. Austin.
Corral, good to be with you as we close out our evening here, at least in our West Coast newsroom. Let's pull up the map that we've been staring at all night. Let's just get a gist of where things stand for now. Harris is at 210. Trump is just 23 electoral votes away, 23 electoral votes away from the big prize. Where can he get those 23 electoral votes? Well, there's 19 in Pennsylvania. That, paired with Michigan, will do it. Pennsylvania, paired with Wisconsin, that'll do it. Michigan, paired with Wisconsin, that'll do it as well. Alaska, pink right now. We're finally starting to get some results in from Alaska. Right now, the preliminary results, 15% of the vote in right now. Trump, as expected, has a pretty healthy lead, about a 15-point lead over Harris. 3 electoral votes at stake in Alaska. Let's just zoom in before we bring in our next guest, because I just want to bring you the latest numbers and the latest vote tallies out of the battlegrounds. Wisconsin right now has tabulated 86% of the votes, and right now Trump has roughly a 4-point lead over Harris. Let's look at Michigan. 61% of the votes have been counted, and that's a sizable lead that Trump has in Michigan. Still, 39% of the votes to be tallied, but at this point, we're talking about Trump having roughly about a 6% vote. He has quite the advantage over Harris in Michigan right now. Pennsylvania, let's pull this up. 90% of the votes counted so far in what's considered the most pivotal swing state. We have 51.2% of the vote going for Donald Trump so far. 90% of the ballots have been counted. So we're talking about roughly a 3.5% advantage for Trump in the Keystone State. We've now been getting results in from states like Nevada. Nevada, it was taking a bit. We didn't get anything from them for quite some time, but now 3/4 of the vote is in. Trump has around a 3-point lead in Harris in Nevada. Arizona, we're not entirely sure if we'll get any more vote tallies in for the rest of the night. Arizona has been stuck at 51% ever since they released their initial batch. All of this is to say, Kuro, when we zoom out on this map, we see a whole lot of red, we see a whole lot of pink. What we don't have yet is an official race call from AP. We'll leave it at that for now.
All right, Austin, and I know you've been a trooper here, out for hours. So we're going to have to wait and see. Like I said, still kind of waiting for more of these results to be confirmed. And we do have this tracker here on our screen. Right now, 247 and 210 for Harris. It's a countdown to 270. Austin Westfall, we'll check in soon. All right, let's continue on here. Of course, as I do want to bring you once again out to this live picture of a podium there in Palm Beach, Florida. As I said before, we're waiting to see if we're going to hear from former President Donald Trump. Right now, that is kind of the news that's going around here. And we do know that a little earlier today, we were informed that Vice President Kamala Harris was not going to be speaking to all of her supporters that came out to see her at Howard University. That was her alma mater there in Washington, D.C. Now, while we wait for this to get underway, let's continue to talk more about these campaign strategies and more specifically why some of these candidates choose to speak and why some of them don't. So to do that, I'd like to bring into the conversation now Casey Myers. He is a professor of public relations at Virginia Tech. Casey, good to see you. I know it's late over there on the East Coast, but first, initial reactions when you hear that Vice President Harris wouldn't be addressing all those people that came out to see her.
Well, it's no surprise given what we've seen in the polls and what we've seen in the results. And as the map shows, I mean, the path to victory for Trump is multifaceted. And you look at Harris, I mean, she would have to really pull an upset and so many different states that are leaning Republican and win Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And if she loses one of those, I mean, her path to victory is very limited, right? So one of the things that I think that we're seeing is that she knows these numbers. She may have even more numbers than what we have access to that are demonstrating to her that maybe victory is not in sight. And so it is not atypical for someone to just not address the supporters that night, but then wait for the next day. And we saw that in 2016.
All right, so Casey, and also we have been previewing, of course, the shot that I continue to show here. Former President Donald Trump going to speak here. It seems a little bit like deja vu. We saw something similar back in 2016. We didn't hear from Hillary Clinton right after those election results were first coming in, but we did hear from the former president. So what can we expect from that appearance tonight?
Well, I think the big question about that appearance is going to be, what does he say to the supporters? I mean, obviously, it's going to be the things about, thanking them for their support, but is he going to declare victory? Is he going to say that victory's in sight, or we're still waiting to kind of see what the final vote tally is going to be? In all likelihood, the final, every vote counted and accounted for is going to happen not tonight, it's going to happen days from now. And so are we waiting on that, or is it going to say, looks like we're headed to a victory now? And it does appear that he is. The question I think now is what is each state, how is it going to come down, what is that margin going to be? There's also going to be this question about the popular vote, and we don't know what that is yet. Could there be a Trump winning the popular vote? That's something that's been a kind of a recent development as of tonight. A few days ago, we were looking at polls and other outcomes that kind of didn't account for that. So what I'm looking for from him is to see what he says about his own victory and see what he says about the states that he is ahead in.
Just want to remind our viewers that we continue on with this, the live look there in Palm Beach County as we await for former President Trump. And here joining us still is Casey.
okay, they're still Democratic, but it's about that margin. Trump's margins are, a little bit better than they were in 2020. And in a swing state, that makes a lot of difference. And so, again, I think that everybody's kind of reading into that data, looking at the statistical probabilities, looking at, what is the percent chance of being able to win, and how many votes you need left with all of the votes that have come in states like Pennsylvania. And they're doing the math too, and they know that, in all likelihood, you're looking at a victory. So again, I think both sides are doing that calculation, and it's traditionally, the victor's going to address his or her constituency groups and supporters that evening of the election.
Casey, hindsight is 2020, and I just have to put up this live picture that we have there because you can see the crowd kind of going wild, dancing around. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of momentum there in Florida, even though we're way past midnight at this point. But I want to bring us back to just last night, actually, because we did have some dueling campaign rallies. At the same time, we heard a speech from Vice President Harris in Philadelphia, the final one before Election Day, and then we heard from former President Trump in Grand Rapids, Michigan. To just kind of compare and contrast both of those speeches, I think Harris spoke for about maybe 20 minutes or so. Trump went for almost 2 hours. Do you think that was really appealing to those supporters, and based on what we've seen today with these elections?
I think Trump's supporters are very loyal, and I think that his base clearly has an affection for him, and that's the kind of speech they want to hear, and they're very receptive to that message. I think Trump really did in the last days of the campaign seize upon a lot of issues. I mean, he took a negative, which was the comedian joke about garbage, and then used Biden's comment and then reversed that negative momentum for something for himself. And so, again, that's really kind of the momentum going into the end of the campaign. Some of the things that he was doing, I mean, we think about, and there'll be a lot of kind of after the fact analysis of what went on in this election and what made him win in some of these states that were really kind of toss-up states. But I think a lot of it has to do with just consistency of message, staying on message, having events, having rallies. It's an unconventional way of campaigning. It's not the traditional going door to door and canvassing. It's also not a campaign that outraised its opponents. So that's been a kind of a narrative that we've seen in a lot of elections where, the person that raises the most money wins. Harris had a campaign fundraising advantage on Trump. So again, I think that it kind of the momentum going into the end, and there was some people kind of reading those signs, and it was not polling, it was just sort of gut instinct saying, there's some momentum here. There's something going on that we think that this may end in a Trump victory. And so I think that that's really one of those things that polls may not capture very well. It's just enthusiasm and just sort of the momentum of the campaign. And we saw that with Trump. And Harris had some of that as well with celebrity endorsements and some of her supporters coming out for her rallies as well. But again, it just seemed like Trump had that edge in that area. So I would say that this is something that maybe a lot of his supporters were anticipating. I think they were cautious about it, though, just given the fact that they had lost in 2020 and given the fact that, some of these polls were just such razor-thin margins.
So speaking on the fact that so many analysts are going to be looking at this, again, kind of backtracking a little bit here when we compare Trump and Harris and getting to this pivotal moment, now in the election cycle where we're seeing this, tight margins, but at the same time, like you were mentioning, how Harris, she did have all of that optimism right at the beginning. And now it's kind of materialized to this point where it's looking like, the former president is really ahead in many of these states, kind of garnering all of that. When we think about the messaging that both of them had, what are some of the comparisons that you can draw on that perhaps, Trump or Harris even maybe were stronger at kind of driving that point home and having voters trust in them?
So I think that what Trump understood in his messaging was that he understood what resonated with voters. And so the big issues, the economy, immigration, crime, and then also reproductive rights is another issue that's more of a Democratic issue. But the top three issues of immigration, economy, and crime were something that Trump was running ahead on. Now, what Harris and the Democrats were running on was a successful talking point for Democrats in 2022 during those midterm elections. So they're running on that. But again, Trump, I think, had a message that resonated with voters, particularly some of these voters that may have been undecided or may have voted for Trump in 16 and then voted for Biden in 2020. And so I think that as we look back on the election, that's going to be one of the big issues that we are talking about in terms of, what was the kind of the messaging around each candidate. The other thing is that I think there's going to be a lot of discussion around how Harris came in to being the nominee. So we had Biden as the nominee, had a terrible debate performance, and then Harris emerges as the nominee, not going through that primary kind of fight that most candidates have to go through. And did that hurt her in a way to not introduce her to the American public? Did that hurt her and the ability to just get organized? Does that slow momentum? And we know, historically speaking, candidates that come out of really tight primary fights are weaker in the general. So she didn't have that, but she also, the Democrats as a whole, kind of didn't coalesce around a candidate early enough. I think another question that we're going to have in kind of the post-election analysis, should Trump prevail, was her vice president one? And so there's going to be a lot of talk. If she had gotten Shapiro, would this be a different election outcome, particularly in a state like Pennsylvania? But again, that's all kind of hindsight being 2020, and it's also making a lot of assumptions that one incident kind of caused a certain result. I think it's an amalgamation of things in this election that really has led to the point that we are right now.
All right, Casey, it's just about 1:30 in the morning over there on the East Coast. So we have been up very late here, of course, here. News never sleeps, especially on an election day. But before I let you go, any final thoughts you have maybe when it comes to the political strategy, the campaigns, how they handle this really surprising election cycle, I would say. I mean, it was only a few months ago that it was Joe Biden that was going to be running as the Democratic nominee.
This has probably been the most unusual election in the history of the United States, and I can't overstate that. Just the events that took place, the way that the campaign has played out. I think maybe even what we're going to see tonight in the campaign results. One of the things that I would look at, though, in this election that's very interesting is we have a lot of down ballot races in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House, and that is a real kind of interesting dynamic as well. We know that we've had Republican pickups in several key states, probably maybe more as the night goes on, but this Republican majority in the Senate. What's the House going to look like? If Trump's elected, does he have two chambers in Congress, and how is he going to leverage that to get his agenda through? And so this is just an unusual election. It's a long election night, but something that I think is really going to result in, I think, a net victory for Republicans.
Yes, that's a big statement there to say, but maybe not so bad given the facts that we've seen and kind of how everything has played out throughout the day today. Just before this, I mean, nobody really knew who was going to come out on top, but that's just how elections go, right? This election cycle. Casey Myers there, public relations professor at Virginia Tech. We appreciate your time. We hope to check in soon, and we'll have to see how this all plays out.
Thank you.
Of course, we want to step away for a quick commercial break here at Live Now from Fox. A reminder, though, that we are still waiting to see if former President Donald Trump, if he's going to speak. It's kind of expected that he will, but when is the question at this point. And plus, we are still tracking all of these results that continue to be called, not just within the presidential race, but all of these other state, Senate, and House races as well. So we'll have more coming up.
This season, we went searching for the very best. So join me in my kitchen here for some truly memorable meals. Welcome back, everybody, to Emerald Cooks.
Oh, like how many still?
Like, stay around.
I won't find that at all.
Just say it. Welcome to life.
Get back to their selfless deserving parents.
My mom's the science person I know.
Always works. Just say it. Revolution cannot be alive. God said I was going to get on. Just say it. Red lights and love your life.
All right, welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. My name is Karal Lahada, and we are continuing with our election night coverage. I'm giving you a live vantage point right now out of Palm Beach in Florida. We're still waiting to see when former President Donald Trump will step up to this podium. We do have also this, another vantage point there. And I do want to continue on with some more breaking news that we're getting in at this moment as we continue to track all of these races in the states that are being called. I want to bring this one up next year. Take a look at this. So AP has not called it just yet. Fox News is reporting, though, that former President Donald Trump did win Pennsylvania. Now, that's one of the states that we are really watching out for here. If anything, it's the one that we have been monitoring all day today, because Harris's clear path to victory would have been to win Pennsylvania. And then I want to bring up this as well, as we talk about New Hampshire, some more of these states that we continue to track here. The AP has called this one, however, Vice President Kamala Harris winning New Hampshire, 51% to 48. To continue this conversation, I'd like to bring in to the program now, obviously, someone who has been with us all day today, my colleague here, Austin Westfall. Austin, fill us in. What are you tracking?
Let's take a look at the map. Let's pull it up. So, looking at 214 for Harris at this point. Trump still at 247. Now, the Associated Press has not called Pennsylvania yet. That's where we're going to be getting our figures from. The Associated Press has not been able to call it yet. We have heard from Fox News that they've called that race. As soon as we hear any major updates from the Associated Press, we'll bring those to you as soon as it comes through. But for now, here's what we're working with. We have Alaska in play. We've got Pennsylvania in play, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Trump at 247. That means that he's going to need 23 electoral votes in order to claim the top prize. Where can he get those 23 from? Well, 19 of them can come from Pennsylvania. He can add 15 with Michigan. He can add 10 with Wisconsin. Any combination of these two will give Trump the presidency. Also, something that can give Trump the presidency is Pennsylvania. This one little district in Maine that's worth one vote, so 19 plus 1 plus 3 in Alaska. That would give us the math in order to give Trump a victory there. So when we play this out, let's go around, because it is fascinating to see how these battleground states have played out. We're now at 88% in Wisconsin. Trump is up by over 4 points in Wisconsin. This was something, if you were following the polls as closely as so many of us were in this election, true toss-up was expected in Wisconsin. 4 points is how much Trump is up by right now. And again, that's with 88% of the vote being tabulated. Let's go to Michigan now. Michigan, a little bit fewer of the votes counted, 64% of them counted so far. But what we're seeing here is about a 6.5% advantage in Trump's favor in Michigan. These are pretty big numbers for Trump to overcome. We're watching very closely, Carell, all of these blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Up to 93% of the votes counted in Pennsylvania at this point. Trump is up by 3 points on the nose. Ever since 1992, the blue wall, they have voted as a unit. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they usually vote blue. In 2016, all 3 of them flipped red. right here on 2024, right now they're all leaning red. It's very possible that they could all vote as a unit again today. That's something that we're going to have to wait for the Associated Press to call. In the meantime, there are two other battlegrounds of note. Arizona, as we've been mentioning, still stuck at 51%. We're not entirely sure if we'll get more votes from them throughout the night. The last one I'll bring you, Nevada. 3/4 of the votes tabulated so far. Trump has a healthy lead in that race, roughly, looks like 3.5 points that Trump is up. So, Carell, there is not a battleground on this map that former President Trump is not either winning or leaning winning right now. We've already called Georgia and North Carolina in Trump's favor, according to the AP. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, still not called, but we will, of course, be watching Pennsylvania very closely.
I mean, Austin, I'm looking at this map behind you, and it is all red, my friend. It's quite surprising, but I guess no shortage of surprises during this election cycle. And let's continue this conversation now. I'd like to bring into the program Richard Gordon. He is a political analyst. Now, Richard, when you're looking at this breakdown that we're giving you here, the fact that Fox News has already projected that Trump would take Pennsylvania, even though Harris did take New Hampshire, I mean, what are you thinking at this moment?
Well, first of all, good morning, and it's good to see you. I have to say, I think like most people, I'm in a bit of a state of shock. I think that no one really saw this coming, and I think it's a very surprising outcome. Once again, I think we have to say to ourselves, what are the polls really doing? What are they really saying? Because they have historically been incapable of polling Donald Trump. This has happened time and time again. He always overperforms. I mean, the one thing we can say is that if you look at Donald Trump's poll numbers and you add 3, you come to just about what he's going to get. And if you look at where he was in the polls as of this morning, well, as of election day morning, and you add +3, it's almost exactly where he is. So it's a pretty surprising event. In that I think, once again, the pollsters and the prognosticators, they all seem to have missed it.
Was there anything that we learned from 2016 about why the polls have such a tough time tracking exactly how Trump voters think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think 2016 was very different than this year. I think in 2016, people just out and out lied. I think people did not want to.
Well, not exactly,
but
but
the fact that they voted for Donald Trump. I think back at the time, people were either embarrassed or whatever it was. They didn't want to admit that they were voting for Donald Trump, and so they weren't truthful. I think what you're seeing tonight, and this is going to. I think this is going to take some time for pollsters and professionals in the business to figure out is how did they miss this? I don't think you had the same issue that you had in 2016. I think they missed a lot of young people. I think they missed a lot of blacks. I think they missed a lot of Hispanics. I think there were great issues with the polling this time that they didn't count. They severely undercounted Donald Trump, and they severely undercounted him in certain constituencies, which are clearly coming home to him that were unexpected.
You know, Austin, I can't remember who we spoke to earlier today because we've been doing this for so many hours now, but we had another political analyst come on and say something to the point of, the polling these days is just not effective. So, people track them for months here to try to give us a prediction, but it just, like you said now, it just doesn't come to fruition no matter what they do. So what needs to happen? How does this cycle even compare to the ones in the past?
Well, I think the polling community, the public service survey community is going to have to really figure out what's going on. I mean, in all fairness, things have changed radically as far as the technology goes. I mean, there used to be a time that they only polled people who had landline telephones. They used to poll people based on economics, people who had certain magazine subscriptions, and they were off. And polling changes as history changes, as technology changes. People now are almost all cell phones, and almost all using computers. It's a very different way to reach the public. And I think the polling community is going to have to figure out a way to do it, or it's just not going to get used anymore. You're not going to report it anymore because it has no relevance if it's not true. And if you look across the board tonight, not just in the presidential, but in other ways, there have been major changes that they just didn't pick up.
So, Richard, question about the blue wall. We've talked so much about Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I've said multiple times tonight that ever since 1992, these three states have voted together. In 2016, they voted red. Every other time since 1992, they have voted blue. Why is it that these three states tend to vote together?
Well, it's interesting. It makes sense they vote together. We've created states sort of somewhat arbitrarily, somewhat historically, but the people are the same. The issues are the same. The issues of someone in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are very, very similar. People voted tonight for their pocketbooks. People are really, really fed up with the high cost of things. And that's really what you're seeing out there. And the people in Wisconsin and the people in Pennsylvania are very similar in how they look at these things. So it makes sense they vote together. I mean, if we didn't have these arbitrary state boundaries, there'd be one huge state and, we wouldn't be so surprised. Look, the cities are going to vote a certain way, and we're seeing that tonight. Now, the cities are way under where they were for President Biden 4 years ago. The urban centers are not voting for Harris the same way they voted for Biden. So we're seeing that, but generally the states are very similar. People aren't all that different. You might live in one state or another, but the economies of the three states are very similar. It makes a lot of sense they would vote the same way.
Rich, it's so funny. When I was listening to the answer that you were giving me about the polling, I think it was you this morning that asked a question about the polling and why it hasn't been so effective. That just shows how long we've been doing this and how long you've been on here with us and kind of breaking the fall down. And to that point, reflecting back on the last few hours and everything that we have seen thus far, what has been maybe the most surprising turn of events for you?
Well, by far, we're talking about a landslide. I mean, we're not talking about this is not what we thought was going to happen. I mean, if you define landslide by the Earth moving, I mean, the Earth moved tonight. The Earth shook on its axis. Donald Trump is going to be president of the United States. The United States Senate is going to be in Republican hands. But probably the House of Representatives is going to be in Republican hands. The Republicans are going to control the presidency, the Senate, the House, and the courts. This is going to be a very, very unusual time in America as far as Donald Trump is going to get a lot of things he wants done accomplished. He's going to have number of Hispanic voters who have
U.S. history to win non-consecutive terms. The first was Grover Cleveland. So bringing back now Richard Gordon, political analyst, and also my colleague here, Austin Westfall. Austin, I know you had a point you wanted to make to Richard.
Well, and also just bouncing off of what Chad was saying there, Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and the 24th president of the United States. It's been quite some time since we've seen a dynamic like this happen. Let's go to the math, because we did just get a race call and we did see the numbers get updated just slightly. Trump has 248 now. That means that he's 22 electoral votes away from the White House, at least from the Associated Press's figures. Where are those votes going to come from eventually? Well, if he gets Pennsylvania and if he gets Alaska, that's a done deal right there. Pennsylvania, let's check in. Let's just see where they're at. 94 now, 94% of the votes counted. Trump has a healthy lead, 3 percentage points with 94% of the vote tallied. When we go to Alaska, 26. This has been crawling very slowly. 26% of the vote has been tallied in Alaska, but as you can see, Trump is absolutely taking this one. We're talking about a margin of just under 20% that Trump is winning by. So if Trump gets Alaska, if the race gets called in Alaska, and if it gets called in Pennsylvania, that is officially going to give the Associated Press the opportunity to call this one in favor of Trump. So that brings me to my question, and it's about a question. What questions do the Democrats now have to face? How do they move forward after a loss like this?
Well, I think you go back to square one. I think you start asking yourself, who do we represent and who are we trying to speak to? And how do our policies and our programs speak to those people? Look, I think the Democratic Party has had a serious problem for a number of years. Really talking to coastal elites, talking to people in New York and California, and having a party that doesn't understand the needs of everyday people. And it's shocking for a party that has been built to deal with those issues and historically has been that political party, the party of the working people. And it is, they need to start saying to themselves, what are we about? And look, a lot of people are upset about some of the issues that Democrats decide to talk about. And, the Republicans have really done a job of making the Democrats look ridiculous on some of these issues. And, the Democratic Party has, because of the way they view inclusiveness, for example, has picked issues that affect very few people. I mean, a lot of people care about it, but it affects a few people. And, this whole wokeness issue is something that bothers a lot of people out there. And I think the Democratic Party, really, if I were they, I would take a few people, I would go to a retreat someplace, and I would take out a piece of paper and say, okay, where are we going? We need a new start. We need to figure out who we are and, in a way, reintroduce ourselves to the American people, because this is not working. And, President Biden did a lot of great things as president, saved the country when it was flat on its back after the pandemic. But in doing so, he put like $1.9 trillion into the economy to save it, which caused inflation. Well, a lot of people don't see the first part of that story. They see the second part of their story, which is higher prices. The Democratic Party has got to figure out how to appeal to average Americans. It's great that they appeal to these wealthy, highly educated people. I mean, that's wonderful as well. But what about appealing to the working person? And that used to be the Democratic Party. If they're going to win again, they have to be that again, and they have to find a way to get back there. And frankly, I watched this election extremely closely. I think the vice president did a good job on a few issues, talking about money for new people who are going to buy their first home, talking about small business, talking about other things. But I think it's a little too late. And I think the Democratic Party has to really search its soul. Now, everyone is going to comment, well, if they went to the left, this would have worked. If they went to the center, this would have worked. The party has to figure this one out. And I think it's going to take time. And, the one thing historically, if we look at this thing, 2 years from now, in a way, will be the 6th year of Donald Trump's administration, right? And midterms of presidents in their second term are usually really bad. They lose a lot of seats. That is a hope the Democratic Party has. But let's hope the country does well. Let's hope the country does well. Let's hope the country doesn't do badly, and that's why the Democrats win. But the Democrats need a message, and I think they're in desperate search of what that message is going to be.
A reminder to our viewers that here we are taking a live look out there in Palm Beach, Florida for the watch party, in which we are still waiting to see if and when former President Donald Trump, who could be the next president, is going to speak to his supporters. Here we have hit the top of a new hour. My name is Karal Lahada. Here joining me is my colleague Austin Westfall and political analyst Richard Gordon. Austin, I know that you had another follow-up question.
Richard, what are you going to be watching for in Trump's speech tonight?
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to say. I don't know what he's going to say, but I'll tell you what I'd like to say. I would like to see him put away the anger, put away the hurt, put away the victimization that has characterized him as a candidate and as a person for all these years. I would like to see him give a speech where he reaches out to all the American people and starts building the country back again, uniting the country. And, if you listen to the first 15, 20 minutes of his acceptance speech at the Republican convention, that's where he was. And then it devolved into something else with the name calling it and whatnot. I would love to see him just put that away and try to find a way to bring the country back together again. Look, roughly half the country voted for him, roughly half the country voted against him. but we are one country, and we need to go forward, and we need to go forward together, and we need to get rid of this anger and bitterness and name calling and belittling each other. I spoke to someone today who was yelled at in a supermarket for wearing a T-shirt, with a campaign slogan on it. Enough of this. Enough of this. And both sides need to start talking together. We are one country. Let's move forward together. I'm very hopeful that the president-elect is able to do that. I mean, the guy you just showed on your TV with the garbage, thing, it's not funny. I mean, this stuff just isn't funny. This isn't a game show. This isn't reality TV. We didn't just kick someone off the island. This is America. This is real. And Donald Trump has an opportunity today, starting at this minute, to become a person that the country needs, which is a unifier, a person who isn't bitter, isn't angry, isn't name calling, isn't belittling. That's who he needs to be. That's what I'd like to see him do in the speech. And, if he does that, if he starts that, and if that's what his administration is about, he will be enormously successful. He has a mandate now. He's going to have control of the levers of government. He can do virtually anything he wants to do. And I hope and pray that he does it for the good of the American people, and he really does it for all the American people, not just the people who voted for him, not just people who are part of his movement, but people who didn't vote for him, but who want the same thing. We all want the same thing. We want a better life for ourselves, for our family. We want a better life for our country. Donald Trump can do that.
Just pray.
Has to start now, and he can't do the things he's done in the past. I think we saw him do it at the convention. I'd like to see him start that right now.
Richard, I do want to ask you one more question before I let you go here. We've been speaking a lot on the former president, Trump, and the fact that Fox News is projecting that he will win the presidency during this election cycle. But let's touch a little bit on the Harris campaign. Before I let you go here, can you pinpoint perhaps a moment during her campaign season here in which maybe she fell off to the point where she just couldn't reach those votes that she needed?
Yeah, I actually think there is a moment, frankly. I think it was the moment she was on The View, believe it or not, and they asked her the question of what would you do differently than President Biden, and she said, I can't think of anything. Historically, that just doesn't work. If you look at, Austin, you were talking about American history before. I mean, there's a lot of parallels between 1892 and Grover Cleveland today. There's also an economic situation back then, and it's similar now. But if you look at this historically, only 4 sitting vice presidents have been elected president of the United States. And it's Adams, Jefferson, Martin Van Buren in 1836, and George H.W. Bush. Those are the 4. Vice presidents don't get elected president. And the reason they don't is because they're too tied to the boss, to the president. You need to break from the president. You need to say dramatically, hey, great guy, I serve him, I have a lot of respect. But when I was in the Oval Office talking to him, he decided to go this way. Now I'm the vice president. I don't get that choice. I gave him my best advice. But when I'm president, we're going this way. And seriously, she should have done that on immigration from day one. She should have picked, I pick an issue, immigration would be the one I would pick. And I would have said, this is how I am going to do immigration going forward. And I think for a lot of people, when she was asked that question and couldn't come up with anything, I think it's a problem. I think it was a major issue. And that's why vice presidents don't win the presidency. It's very hard. 4 in 250 years, and 3 of them, were our first 8 presidents. It just doesn't happen. And so, in order to do it, you have to be completely separate. And let's just be honest. Joe Biden's approval rating in Wisconsin is at 31%. If you want to win Wisconsin, you're going to have to show the people, of the Badger State that you are different. That you are different than him, and that you're going to take this country in a different direction. And she failed to do that. And I know it's very hard to be critical of someone who you respect, who you work closely with, who's been very good to you. It's hard to do that. But I'm betting that if the vice president sat down with the president sometime in August and said, look, we know how hard this is. The only way I win, and the only way
Consider the moment for unity, especially when she won't even concede.
They didn't win. They didn't say yet.
We did bring you
I mean,
this
I was
news.
like,
We're still waiting for
come
the
on, just
Associated
vote
Press to
already.
confirm, but Chad says this.
it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future. Every single day, I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body, I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. And in addition to having won the battleground states of North Carolina, I love these places. Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. We are now winning in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska, which would result in us carrying at least 315 electoral votes. But it's much easier doing what the networks did or whoever called it, because there was no other path. There was no other path to victory. We also have won the popular vote. That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Winning the popular vote was very nice, very nice. I worked out it. A great feeling of love. We have a great feeling of love in this very large room with unbelievable people standing by my side. These people have been incredible. They made the journey with me, and we're going to make you very happy. We're going to make you very proud of your vote. I hope that you're going to be looking back someday and say that was one of the truly important moments of my life when I voted for this group of people beyond the president, this group of great people. America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's and the Senate races in Montana, Nevada, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, were all won by the MAGA movement. They helped so much. And in those cases, every one of them, we worked with the senators. They were tough races. And I mean, the number of victories in the Senate was absolutely incredible. And we did tele-rallies. We did tele-rallies with each one of them. And sometimes we did 2 or 3 and it was amazing to look at all of those victories. Nobody expected that, nobody. So I just wanted to thank you very much for that. And you have some great senators and some great new senators. And it also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives. And I want to thank Mike Johnson. I think he's doing a terrific job. Terrific job. I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country. Can you believe it? No, she's done a great job, works very hard to help people. So I just want to thank her, but I want to thank my whole family, my amazing children, and they are amazing children. And we all think our children are. Everybody here thinks their children are amazing. But that's a good thing when you think they are. But Don, Eric, Ivanka, Tiffany, Barron, Laura, Jared, Kimberly, Michael, thank you all. What a help. My father-in-law, Victor, is tremendous, and we miss very much Melania's mother, Amalia. We miss Amalia, don't we? Huh? She would be very happy right now, standing on this stage. She'd be so proud. She was a great woman, that one. Beautiful inside and out. She was a great woman. I want to be the first to congratulate our great, now I can say, Vice President-elect of the United States. And his absolutely remarkable and beautiful wife, Ushabez. And he's a feisty guy, isn't he? You know, I've said, going to the enemy camp, and you know the enemy camp is certain networks. A lot of people don't like to, sir, do I have to do that? He just goes, okay, which one? CNN, MSDNC? He'll say, all right, thank you very much. He actually looks fun. He's like the only guy I've ever seen. He really looks forward to it, and then he just goes and absolutely obliterates them. Say a couple of words.
I don't know, guys. It looks like the race is over.
To me, and I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America. And under President Trump's leadership, we're never going to stop fighting for you, for your dreams, for the future of your children. And after the greatest political comeback in American history, we're going to lead the greatest economic comeback in American history under Donald Trump's leadership.
I got a feeling there will be more violence again. But we're just gonna have to pray and see. Hopefully, nothing happens.
At the beginning, but he was. I knew the brain was a good one, about as good as it gets. And we love the family, and we're gonna have a great 4 years, and we're gonna turn our country around, make it something very special. Lost that little thing called special. We have to make it so we're going to make this so great. It's the greatest country and potentially the greatest country in the world by far. And right now we're going to just work very hard to get all of that back. We're going to make it the best it's ever been. We can do that. If we had to wait longer, I don't know. It was going bad, and it was going bad fast. We're going to have to seal up those borders, and we're going to have to let people come into our country. We want people to come back in.